The last argument we have is what we call the free will defense. The free will defense is different than some of the others in that it's not technically a theodicy because it's not insinuating why God is allowing evil. Rather, what the free will defense does is it simply says it's possible that God and evil could both coexist. And what the free will defense says, it says, look, not all evil is the same. For example, things like rape and murder. Those aren't really acts that are caused by God. Those are things that people do to people. War, famine. Sometimes famine, usually the actual drought and thing is one thing, but it's the fact that certain people try to take advantage of resources and steal and hoard and do other things that actually makes famine as bad as it is. And so what they say is they would say those things are what we call moral evils. And moral evil is basically evil that comes about as a result of human free will. Humans make choices and cause suffering and pain. And then we have another category which is called natural evil. And natural evil is stuff that happens without any human intervention. This is stuff that just naturally occurs. Things like cancer. Suicide, perhaps, in the form that, mental illness. And there are a lot that fall into both categories. Like, for example, addictiveness might be somewhat natural, but it is also exacerbated by a moral fault. Hurricanes are bad, but it's the fact you built right next to the ocean, perhaps, that makes the hurricane really bad for you. But a hurricane is a natural evil. A tornado is a natural evil. Cancer is a natural evil. These are all things that happen without any human intervention. These are things that just happen naturally. Now, with that said, what they do is they then say, well, it is possible that God gave humans free will. And if God gave humans free will, then they have the ability to choose what they want. Now, some people might say, well, why didn't God not give people free will? And the answer would be, well, we don't have to answer that question. But in the end, it's better to choose things freely than to lack any ability to choose. To just be a mindless robot that has no choice in the world, is unable to make decisions. They just simply act because they don't have, just because that's what they're supposed to do, and they lack the ability to make choices. That makes one not really a free animal. And so free will is something that gives the ability to act and to choose and make their own decisions, and that's better than to make always the right decision by compulsion. And so some people will say, we have free will, which gives us the ability to do bad and to cause evil, but in the end, it's better to have free will than not free will. And so at the end of the day, humans are the ones responsible for moral evil. Then the question becomes, well, then what about natural evil? And the problem with natural evil is they would say, well, natural evil is just simply the way the world works. For example, fire burns. Okay? That's part of what fire does. You need fire because you need to be able to burn wood to create heat. You need fire to be able to cook food. You need fire to be able to do other things. But sometimes, lightning strikes, it starts a fire, and it kills people. Sometimes, we need weather. We need the weather to be dry and wet and warm and cold in order to grow agriculture. And sometimes those weather conditions create tornadoes. And sometimes those create hurricanes. And most scientists will actually say that a hurricane is actually in some ways a positive thing for the environment. And because it actually, helps churn up the sea, kills life, gives it a rebirth. Same thing with forest fires and other things. But sometimes they hurt people. And so at the end of the day, gravity is a good thing because it keeps us all on this earth, and it keeps the oxygen down close to the earth so we can breathe. But at the end of the day, if gravity wasn't there, we wouldn't be able to breathe. We wouldn't be able to stay on the earth. We wouldn't be able to cook our food without fire. We wouldn't be able to live our lives without weather. And although sometimes these have negative consequences, it is basically a system that allows for the world to progress. It's just the way it is. And sometimes evil comes about. It's the best of all possibilities. I don't know that that answer fully explains natural evil, but the idea, though, is this kind of divide and conquer. You know, you separate moral and natural evil. You explain moral evil as the fault of humans, which still leaves the question of why God wouldn't allow us to always choose the good. That's a question that comes along, and one we're not going to address here. And then you have natural evil, which is this issue of, that things happen, things like cancer and other things. And why do we allow that? Well, one of the best examples of natural evil that I always like is, like the suffering of animals. As an example, suppose, you're out and, there's a fire, a forest fire, and a deer ends up getting caught in the forest fire and gets severe burns across 80% of its body. And it lays there in the forest floor, writhing in pain for a couple days before finally succumbing to the burn wounds. The question would be, why would God allow that? And some people will say, well, it's a natural evil. And that's just the way it is. Fire burns. Fire is used to cook. Fire is used to rebirth the forest. And so occasionally an animal gets caught in it. Okay, that's fair enough. But it still doesn't explain why God can't intervene and stop certain cases. And that is a question that, you'd really have to take a whole class in philosophy of religion. But the free will defense on its surface at least separates those two and suggests the natural evil is a result of just the natural order, the way the world works, and the moral evil is the result of people.